You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. In today's episode, discussing Spurs players recovering from offseason injuries and what their injuries mean for preseason and the start of the regular season. The Spurs want defense to be their anchor this season. The team says the offense can work with multiple playmakers. And then finally, expectations from players on the upcoming season. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Spot Up Pod. It's been a little over a week since I last recorded. As I mentioned in the last episode, I wanted the Spurs to go through media day and then also go through a few practices before I came back onto the microphone. And so that has actually happened. Media day took place on Monday. I am recording on Thursday, and the Spurs have already had two practices this past week. So let's get into our main topics here. Let's begin with the first topic, which is the preseason injuries, or the offseason injuries, should we say, that are going to lead into the preseason. So when we go back to the projected starters that I've discussed here on the Spot Up Pod, I did anticipate that the Spurs would start De'Aaron Fox at the point, Stephon Castle at the 2, Devin Vassell at the 3, Harrison Barnes at the 4, and then Victor Wembanyama at the 5. However, De'Aaron Fox's hamstring injury has kind of thrown that off a bit here in the preseason with some of the news that was shared by both Fox and head coach Mitch Johnson. So on media day on Monday, De'Aaron Fox shared that he did injure his right hamstring in the offseason. It was a new injury for him, one that he had never experienced before. So initially, he didn't really know that he was injured with that hamstring issue. He said that he himself said that he's expected to be out for all of the preseason games for the Spurs, and he could possibly be out against the Dallas Mavericks on opening night of October 22nd. He did say that he feels good, that he's able to run almost close to full speed, but ultimately it's gonna be up to the medical staff for the Spurs to determine whether or not he can play. Coach Mitch Johnson said that the team they will not rush him back. They're going to be very cautious with him, and they do want to keep in mind that it is a long season, so they'd rather have him 100% healthy before clearing him to play. So again, with Fox, he's expected to miss all the preseason games, and he might even miss opening night. So what is this? What is the impact of Fox's injury, this hamstring issue? Is that Stephon Castle is likely going to run the point guard position now that Fox is out for now, at least in the preseason and maybe even on opening night. Regarding the rest of the starters that lineup I talked about, maybe Vassell shifts down to the shooting guard spot next to Castle, and then maybe this opens up the opportunity for a player off the bench, someone like Julian Champagnie, to maybe come in and play small forward, or possibly maybe Harrison Barnes shifts down to small forward, and then maybe Jeremy Sochan can come from off the bench to play starting power forward next to Wemby in the front court. And I'll talk about Sochan, who has some injury issues as well that he's dealing with. So again, I think that's kind of where the shift is at. Maybe if Fox isn't, at least for the preseason, Fox isn't expected to be there. So I do see someone from the bench coming up to play in the starting lineup, someone like Julian Champagnie or possibly Jeremy Sochan. And then if not, by opening night, maybe the Spurs stick with that that kind of a lineup, if Fox isn't 100% healthy. Now let's talk about the projected second unit that I had on paper before learning about all these injuries. So the projected second unit or the reserves were supposed to be Dylan Harper, Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sochan, Luke Cornett, and then some minutes of Kelly Olynyk playing. But there's several injuries on this second unit as well for the Spurs right now in preseason. So let's first begin with Dylan Harper, who's expected to be the backup point guard for the Spurs. So as we know, Harper was dealing with thumb surgery. He did say at media day that he can do some light shooting right now with the splint on, and he's able to work on his conditioning. On whether or not he's going to play in the preseason, Coach Johnson said we'll see. So he didn't say flat out no, but he said we'll see. Coach Johnson didn't want to put a timetable on when Harper would return to the floor. The Spurs are also going to be very extra cautious before clearing Harper as well. Harper said that he thinks he can play in a preseason game, but again, it's ultimately going to be up to the Spurs' medical staff. So right now we're anticipating that Harper won't play in the preseason. So what does this do to the lineup? So the impact is that Jordan McLaughlin, a veteran point guard the Spurs re-signed this past offseason, he's likely going to get those backup point guard minutes while Harper's out during the preseason. And then, there's a chance for maybe someone like David Jones-Garcia, who's on a two-way contract, to try to compete with McLaughlin for those minutes. Also, if Fox isn't ready by opening night or even right now in the preseason, I think that, again, if somebody like Julian Champagnie shifts up to the starting lineup for now, I think this also opens up a small window in preseason, at least, for someone like Carter Bryant or Lindy Waters III to possibly get some of those backup wing minutes until both Harper and Fox are both 100% ready to go back in the lineup. Another player on that bench unit who's injured right now is Jeremy Sochan. So as we remember, right before Eurobasket started with Poland, Jeremy Sochan did get injured with his left hamstring, and so he didn't get to play in Eurobasket. And so he did say that he tweaked his left hamstring during that training camp with Poland, and so it was a minor injury for him. He said Coach Johnson did say that he's improving, but that the Spurs are again going to be cautious with Sochan as well on his return. Sochan said that he should be able to participate in training camp, which I would assume also means some of the preseason games. So again, that's where Sochan's injury status stands. As far as the impact with Sochan out right now, again, whenever he's cleared, there's a chance that maybe he starts until Fox returns, maybe at power forward, and again, Harrison Barnes shifts down to small forward. Or if Sochan's not cleared in the preseason and possibly even early in the season, then I think that opens up an opportunity for someone like Kelly Olynyk to get some minutes at power forward, or one of the younger players like Carter Bryant, or even a training camp invite Micah Potter to get some of those backup power forward minutes until Sochan again returns to the lineup during the preseason. So Sochan is also dealing with injury. And then one more injury to go through, and that is Kelly Olynyk. So back on April 28th, when Olynyk was still a member of the New Orleans Pelicans, he underwent left heel surgery, and so he's still recovering from that surgery. So he's not practicing yet, according to Tom Orsborn of the San Antonio Express News. But according to Orsborn, he is expected to play at some point in the preseason, Olynyk, and he should also be ready to go for the start of the regular season, later on in late October. So the impact of not having Olynyk either right now, it means there's a chance that if Olynyk gets back before Sochan, then I think Olynyk can play some of those backup power forward minutes. Or if he's not ready, well, then again, I think Sochan has a chance of those backup power forward minutes, Carter Bryant or Micah Potter. So again, we got to just really, see day by day what the player's injury, status is for a lot of these players that are out right now. And again, it's just preseason, so yeah, you might see some of the younger players get some minutes that maybe weren't as expected right away. But again, kind of what goes back to what Dylan Harper said in his interview, where he kind of mentioned that, regarding himself at least, he was kind of glad that at least the injury happened in the offseason and not during the season. So, and this kind of goes from pretty much all the players right now that are injured, is that at least these injuries did occur, in the offseason, so that they're not going to impact these players too much at the start of the regular season. They should at least be ready to go by the first few weeks of the regular season, all of these Spurs' rotation players, barring any any other injuries. So again, that's kind of where the team stands with the injury report, because like I said, it's a long one right now, just to begin training camp here and the preseason game that's going to begin on Monday. All right, so for our second topic, let's talk about one of the themes that the Spurs were discussing. Multiple players discussed this, and that was the focus on defense for the team. So first, let's go to Coach Mitch Johnson. He says that he wants the defense to be the team's identity to begin the season. Victor Wembanyama said that playing defense this season for the team will be a non-negotiable for every player on the roster. Basically, you're not getting minutes, or you're not playing much unless you're playing defense on this team, regardless of what your role is, regardless of where you're at in the rotation. He said both players and coaches are going to hold each other accountable for playing defense. He also says that with the addition of Luke Cornett, who's a notable defender himself, Wemby expects the Spurs to have the best rim protection in the league. That's kind of one of the bars he's setting for the Spurs this year, is to have one of the best rim protections in the league, because again, he's going to have himself starting, but then also have Cornett as a backup big whenever he's resting, or they could share the floor together, as has been evidenced in some of their practice footage already. So again, Wemby has a very high bar for both players to play defense out there, but then also for he and Cornett, that rim protection really needs to be solid. It's his expectation. Multiple players said that the defense is looking scary already. Devin Vassell said that. Stephon Castle said that. And even Jeremy Sochan all said the word scary in their remarks. Castle specifically said that in the open runs the Spurs players were having, they already looked really good on defense, considering yet that the coaches really hadn't, put in any kind of coverages or schemes or anything like that. And so it should get it even better once those technical parts of the defense come into play. Luke Cornett does think that the Spurs can build their identity on defense and have that be their anchor to carry them for those first few weeks of the season. Maybe when the offense is first getting together and the chemistry is starting to build up, he thinks that defense can be the area that they hang their hat on. Julian Champagnie mentioned how a new associate head coach Sean Sweeney and new assistant coach Scott King have been kind of like the architects of the defense, or really have a lot of say-so in the defense and kind of the organization and the principles that they're running out there. So he expects those two coaches to have a big part of the defense. And then veteran Jordan McLaughlin commented on how there's an importance of every single individual defender to do their job on defense. He says, as far as being a guard, he said, pressuring the player, bringing the ball up the floor, even sometimes providing some full court pressure, and kind of just keeping a hand on the player, and then try to block either his passing lane or his shooting angle. And if the player gets by you, you want to funnel that player into Wemby. That way Wemby can clean up clean up and provide rim protection. So again, McLaughlin talked about how every player has that responsibility on defense. And then McLaughlin also noticed that in his since February when he was traded to the Spurs, he noticed that the Spurs really lack size and help on the boards whenever Wemby took a break last season before his blood clot injury rolled him out for the season. And so he says that's what's key about getting Luke Cornett on the team now, is that they're going to have a very stable defense for all 48 minutes of the game, whether Victor's on the floor or not, now that they have Luke Cornett behind them ready to go. So again, there's a very high expectation from the players, the coaches, for this defense. Now we'll see where do they finish the season, assuming that they have a healthy roster going forward. Can they crack the top 10, top 5, maybe at least league average at worst. So again, that's kind of this team has set a very high bar for their defense. So again, we'll kind of see where they finish out. All right, so moving on to the third topic, another conversation, or I guess questions that were coming about to the players was the questions about the offense. Again, one of the big, questions has been, the fact that the Spurs did draft Dylan Harper, and they already had De'Aaron Fox, who they traded for, who they signed to an extension, and then they already have the reigning Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle, basically all lead guards, downhill kind of guards, creative playmakers, and so that's a lot of the questions that came in from the media is, how is that going to work on offense? So let me just go through some of the comments that came from the coaches and players. So Coach Johnson did say that offensively, it is going to take some time for the chemistry to develop for all the new players that are joining the team. Plus, he cited the fact that Wemby and Fox only played in 5 games last season, so they kind of need to develop a partnership as well. He did say, though, that a team that went to the finals, the Indiana Pacers, they're a team who they can look at as an example of having multiple guards who can dribble, pass, and shoot, and making the offense work. So he's using the Indiana Pacers as a team to kind of reference for making it work with multiple ball handling guards. De'Aaron Fox said that he wants the Spurs to be one of the better pick and roll teams in the league, and he actually he aims to build a good pick and roll partnership with Wemby out there. And then he said it's not just about him and Victor, in a pick and roll. It's also about the other 3 players on the floor. What are they doing to space the floor, and kind of what are they doing off ball? Fox said regarding multiple ball handlers, he said, with multiple players who can touch the paint, he said this: for us, it's can we make open shots? Because we're going to create a lot of open shots. What happens after the initial guy creates something? So I think that is really one of the key questions is, do the Spurs have enough shooting around all those different, playmakers, Wemby, Fox, Castle, Harper, if those players aren't on the ball, are they ready to make open shots, and plus the other players around them? So I think I think Fox really hit a key question there is are the players going to be able to make open shots? And again, we'll see how much development they've made in the offseason with their outside shooting ability. Stephon Castle said that he thinks it's a plus to have 3 talented high IQ guards who play a similar position out there. Dylan Harper says that playing off each other can be a big thing for the guards, but he doesn't see it as a challenge. And then Julian Champagny shared that it's important for players like him, Lindy Waters III, the shooters on the team, to be able to not just, space the floor, but know how to make themselves target, moving in the right places whenever Wemby has the ball, Fox, Castle, Harper, and they're driving inside or they're getting double teamed. How do you create a window for yourself? So again, we'll kind of see where these Spurs' offense finishes this season. I know that Crafted NBA, they have one of their preseason models up, and they expect the Spurs to have a within a league average offense, the 12th ranked offense of 115.4 points per 100. So again, we'll kind of see where they exactly finish the season. But again, those are some of the comments that came out from training camp and media day regarding the offense. Let's keep going. All right, so now for the last part of this episode, let's talk about some of the expectations that the players have kind of said over on Media Day and during the week about their expectations for this upcoming season. Regarding Wemby, he said, for sure that's the goal about trying to make the playoffs. So Wemby basically says that the playoffs are the goal here. De'Aaron Fox said he does want to make the playoffs as well, but he mentioned how the team really needs to be focused during the regular season and not take any games for granted, because he says that he's been in the Western Conference for a number of years when he was with the Sacramento Kings, and he said just a short losing streak at a time in the Western Conference can mean that you either play in the play-in tournament, which doesn't guarantee you a playoff spot, or you miss the playoffs altogether. You might finish in the high 30s and wins instead of over 40 wins or 45 wins, something like that. So anyway, that's what Fox said about being focused during the season, because just one little slip up can really mess up your season of being in that tough Western Conference. Stephon Castle did say that the goal is to make the playoffs. Luke Cornett said that, yes, he wants to make the playoffs, but he says part of that, after being with a successful team like the Boston Celtics, is that how you approach each day. Cornette said that, the one thing the Celtics did was that they approached, each game at hand, basically not even looking to the playoffs, looking at, who's that opponent right in front of you on that night, and really focusing on trying to win that game. And he says that if you do that, if you just focus on the game at hand, the game in front of you, that you're not skipping steps, and eventually that's going to lead to some success of trying to get into the playoffs. Yeah, those are just some of the comments that came out regarding the Spurs' expectations. So again, this year, the Spurs, according to Vegas, they are expected to either, be in the playoffs or be in that play-in range. So again, there's higher expectations for this upcoming season. Now, so that kind of closes out this episode. Before I close out, let me just talk about the next episode now that we are, basically in season mode now. I will be having one episode per week. So my next episode, I'm aiming to record next Thursday after the Spurs have already played 2 preseason games. They're going to play against the Guangdong Lions on Monday, and then they play the Miami Heat on Wednesday in preseason. So again, I should be able to talk about 2 preseason games by the time the next episode airs. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Spotted Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spotted Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.